Raymond McLeod is accused of strangling his girlfriend Krystal Mitchell to death back in June of 2016. He then fled the country, but was eventually captured in 2022 in El Salvador. Investigators claim that McLeod, who is a bodybuilder, was a heavy drinker and had a history of domestic violence.
On the night that Mitchell was killed, a witness at a bar said they saw McLeod slap the victim before leaving. McLeod claims he accidentally killed Mitchell after a night of rough sex. Now, last week, McLeod was in court for a preliminary hearing to determine if his case should go to trial. Now, during that hearing, the defense called on TV personality, internist, and addiction medicine specialist, Dr. Drew Pinsky, to testify about McLeod's claims. Take a look.
Please solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. May you please be seated at the witness stand. Could you please state your full name and spell it for the record?
David Drew Pinsky, P-I-N-S-K-Y.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Please proceed. Good afternoon, Dr. Pinsky.
Afternoon.
Is it fair to say that although you and I have known each other for over 20 years, you have never testified on any of my cases?
Never.
In fact, this is not your normal course of business to testify in court on cases, whether it be civil or criminal.
Certainly not.
However, you are a licensed medical doctor, correct?
That is true.
And when it comes to talking about understanding and educating others about sexual behaviors, would you say that is your specialty?
That is something I've done for decades.
So would you say that you're an expert in that matter?
I would say so.
How long have you been a licensed medical doctor?
I've been an MD 40 years, licensed 39 years, I think, 1985.
Okay. And so to be clear, you are not a psychologist, you are a medical doctor.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, in addition to all of your medical accomplishments, you also have been a national radio host for the last 30 years, is that correct?
34 years.
34 years. And what was the most popular radio show you hosted?
It was a show called Loveline that was nationally syndicated, started in 1983 and ended in roughly 2017.
Okay, so how long did that show last?
34 years.
Okay. And was that a call-in show?
Yes.
And how large of an audience would you say you had for the show?
At its peak, definitely millions every night.
Millions of people every night.
Yes.
And did those discussions include speaking frequently about rough consensual sex?
Certainly 10% of the time, I would say, certainly as we hit later 90s and 2000, 10% of sort of kink and alternative sexual practices were part of the conversation, about 10% of the time.
How about current sexual behaviors?
Clarify.
So is there a difference? Did you have different conversations about rough consensual sex, erotic asphyxiation, which I will get into, BDSM,
Yes.
sexual relations, and did those make up the majority of your conversations?
If you that description, yes.
Made up the majority
Yes.
of your conversations. So when we're specifically talking about erotic asphyxiation, which I'm going to have you explain to us, please, in a moment, would you say that that became a major talking point around the year 2000?
I'd say around 2000 is when it became commonplace.
Okay. So can you please share for us what that means?
It means using some way of restricting the airway to enhance sexual arousal and orgasm.
And how common is that?
Very common.
Okay. Has it become more common?
It has become and continues to become very common.
And when you say common, can you share with the court in your research of literature and discussing it with people, and specifically as it relates to the Journal of Sexual Medicine from 2021, what the actual numbers report?
73% of sexually active college undergraduate women reported having been choked. Also reported that among male and female undergraduate with sexual experience, 43% had choked a partner.
Would you say that's a fairly high number?
That is a high number, but it's not surprising.
So it is not surprising to you?
Not to me.
So in the discussions that you have routinely, this comes up?
Yes.
All the time?
Frequently.
Okay. And is choking to the point of unconsciousness uncommon?
No. Some people seek that.
And is it done for sexual pleasure?
Yes.
And in your experience and based on your expertise in this area, is it primarily done to bolster or increase the sexual pleasure of one or both of the partners?
Correct.
In your experience, is it done to cause harm to that person?
No.
In your experience, in fact, does it have the opposite effect, meaning that it is done to cause more pleasure and less harm?
That is the intent.
There's not a lot. Yeah, I agree.
With talking to over 200,000 people, is the purpose of erotic asphyxiation done for pleasure, or is it done to cause harm?
For pleasure.
Thank you. Is it fair to say that in your experience, and again, we're talking about 240,000 conversations, we're talking about you being a medical doctor for nearly 40 years, having a live show that millions of people listen to, is it fair to say, for you to say that neither party appreciates the risks involved in erotic asphyxiation?
Correct. I've been disturbed and worried about that for almost 2 decades.
And is that because they do not appreciate the risks?
Because they do
At this
not.
point, I'm going to object to sort of outside the scope of really going far with that.
Okay, I'll allow that final question and answer. You can give the answer and then move on. Go ahead.
Question again, please.
In your experience, do neither party appreciate the risk involved in erotic asphyxiation?
In my experience, I have been discussing this topic and always emphasizing the risk. And in that context of having this conversation, I have been criticized for being not sex positive and for being anti-kink, but I have seen horrible outcomes. And I've been gravely concerned about it. And with the numbers where they are now, I've become even more so.
And what percentage of people would you say have appreciated the risk when you're talking to them?
Objection, Your Honor. Outside the scope.
I think it is very relevant, Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Objection sustained.
Turning your attention to the facts of this case, have you read the police reports in this case?
Objection.
No. The doctor can indicate the sources from which he reviewed information in this case, but not testify about them. Go ahead, sir.
Have you read the police?
Reviewed the police reports, the detective reports, the witness interviews, the autopsy,
The coroner's report?
the coroner's report, the autopsy pictures, and medical examiner's report.
Okay. So I'm going to walk you through some hypotheticals. I'm not going to use names. We're going to use individuals, okay? Assuming that an individual in a sexual relationship with another individual and they engage in manual strangulation to unconsciousness, slapping, spanking, anal, aggressive sexual practices, would that be consistent with the circumstances and injuries that you have seen in this case?
Yes.
Again, assuming that an individual is in a sexual, consensual relationship in which both parties engaged in consensual anal sex during rough sex and they were okay with it, would that be consistent with the circumstances and injuries in this case?
Potentially, yes.
Object to the wording and the phrasing
Sustained.
of that. Move to strike.
Stricken. It's a hypothetical as to both pieces of your
Okay.
question.
Assuming that there is an individual in a sexual relationship that is involved in rough sex involving anal, would that be consistent with the circumstances and injuries that you've seen in this case?
Objection, improper question.
That second part of your question is what's improper. You can call
Okay.
upon the facts in this case that are part of your
Okay, thank you, thank you,
Sustained.
thank you. Okay, so assuming that an individual is engaged in anal consensual rough sex and they were okay with it, we're going to assume that. Okay? Suppose a woman who has been found in a bed naked in a room she was sharing with a partner with the cause of death to be determined to be strangulation.
Objection, improper.
Rule.
Would that be consistent?
Yes.
Thank you.